and to my great rejoicing, many of you are here from those days that beginning in the 1970s, we started what I thought were really spectacular big Halloween meetings and parties. This has, of course, been reduced. However, what has been reduced may also be increased. So keep your eyes and ears open for next year, because we intend to expand this activity to approximate, if not exactly duplicate, our big Halloween parties of yonder. You know, there was an airline magazine, a Southwest Airlines magazine, that was writing about the interesting things in Los Angeles, and it had the Gnostic Society there, and said it has the Gnostic Society has the best Halloween parties in town. Now to have that in an airline magazine, I think that's a signal honor. It is something like a Los Angeles Congressional Medal of Honor, being awarded, and we were very proud of it, and we will try to restore our activities as close to that level as possible. Now, for this evening, I have chosen a text which I have referred to and quoted a little bit here and there on and off over the years, and which perhaps I hope to deal with in a little greater detail. But that also has a story behind it. You know, when you reach an advanced age like mine, then somehow there is always a story with everything. And this is why the old people were the storytellers in every culture. So the story with this one is that fairly early after my coming to Los Angeles, probably I would say around 1954 or thereabouts, when we still had two theosophical lodges in Los Angeles. The Besant Lodge here, which we just purchased the building at that time, and the Los Angeles Lodge, which was down in the Wilshire area. So in the Los Angeles Wilshire area lodge, there was a talk announced that from the East Coast, Dr. Alvin Boyd Kuhn would give a talk on Halloween. And it was in the fall, fairly close to Halloween. And so I said, well, I might as well go. The prehistory of that is, again, that when I arrived here in the United States, in very short order, I was, it doesn't make any difference where I was ensconced. I was in the California Siberia, which you may, or maybe even the California Gulag, called the San Joaquin Valley. So if there's anybody from San Joaquin Valley who takes offense at that, please yell at me after the lecture, okay? In any event, where I was there in this small town, came Halloween, and all of a sudden there were these pumpkins and lights and curious masks and people disguised walking around. Said, what on earth is this? And so I tried to obtain information about it from my various acquaintances and colleagues there, and they didn't offer much. They said that it was an old country custom, a folk custom from the British Isles, and probably originating in Cornwall, and it is just simply a time for revelry at this particular time of the year. So I accepted that, but I thought, well, maybe now I will obtain some information of a little more profound nature. And indeed I did. And there, in that particular place, I met Dr. Alvin Boyd Kuhn, who was a fascinating gentleman of pretty mature years by then, who was the only person, as far as we know, who got his PhD at the Columbia University in 1931 by writing a book about theosophy. Wow. Theosophy, a revival of ancient wisdom. Very, very fine work. In any event, and then subsequently he wrote many books and was a very, very fine lecturer. In this particular time he was lecturing about Halloween. So I thought, well, maybe I'll learn something in this strange country and at this strange time of the year. So I am trying to concentrate very assiduously now in order not to take away from the main ideas too much of the sort of the introductory portion of that Dr. Kuhn presented. And what it really amounted to was something that I have mentioned here, especially around Halloween quite often, namely the how particularly in times of classical antiquity, Egypt, Greece, Persia, ultimately Rome, and the annual calendar of the zodiacal circle served as a most important symbolic instructional device. And so just very, very quickly saying something about that, you know that pictorially that is represented as a circle which is intersected by an equal armed cross, and the main symbolism being that it is intersected by the solstices and the equinoxes. So the vertical bar of the cross is then anchored in the two solstices. Summer solstice, which is placed on top of the circle, winter solstice with Christmas on the bottom of the circle. And then the horizontal bar of the cross is anchored to the two equinoxes. On one side the autumnal or fall equinox, on the other side the spring equinox. Now, what the symbolism of these conjunctions indicated to the ancients was, according to Dr. Kuhn, who among other things, and was a brilliant, brilliant man, taught himself with some minimal assistance from an expert, he taught himself the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So, you know, there are not too many people in this world of ours who do that. And he derived a great many of his ideas of universal or almost universal symbolism from Egyptian sources. Now, in any event, there's probably ancient Egyptian music that has been preserved in some fashion. Can you see the Egyptians with their nemesis and so dancing around? Yeah. So from all of these sources, he gathered that the great cosmic diagram, the great mandala, was, at least by a good many people in the know, as it were, which means Gnostics, interpreted in the following fashion, that out of the manifest universe, from the inner aeons of being, there come the sparks of light, which are the divine spirits of the human being, and they fall into this circular manifestation, and they enter it at the top, where symbolically the summer solstice is located. So when the sun shines brightly, when the light is everywhere and the light lasts into late in the evening and so forth, that is the symbol of ourselves as beings of light, having come into this curious world. And then the round around the merry-go-round begins. And so then we begin moving, and we come to the equinox, to the autumnal equinox. And there is the darkening that takes place. And so we who are little lights of the divine, and perhaps other lights of the divine, now enter a spiritual climate, which is a lot more limited, a lot darker, and a lot more primitive than the one that they came from. Obviously, this is a creation myth that is very different from the Judeo-Christian creation myth, because it has nothing to do with the Creator God making this happen, but it just happens in the course of a cosmic and transcosmic scheme of emanational manifestation. All right. Now, each one of these symbolic points, equinoxes and solstices, last for a while. You know, this doesn't just last a day. And so after each one of these, there is about a 30-day period when the psycho-spiritual impact of that stage in the creational development is experienced. Now, not to talk about the others, which are of course also present, but talking about Halloween, the Halloween festival is the 40th day after the autumnal equinox. So that is the time when the sort of the full impact of the coming down to earth and sort of the getting involved in all of this weird stuff that we call earthly life takes place and is experienced. Now, Dr. Kuhn's fabulous little book, which, as I say, I also heard as a lecture, is really based on that proposition, that Halloween in turn was the celebration and the commemoration, the bringing into consciousness of we as divine souls entering the physical world. And it's nice points and it's not so nice points, well, the whole kit and caboodle of earthly life. And that being the case, he said that he called it autumn's mysterious revel also, meaning that there is a celebration even of a weird and maybe eccentric nature of us having come into earthly existence and being here, that takes place in the Halloween season. And so most of the symbolism of Halloween he interpreted in that fashion, and it hangs together just absolutely beautifully, and has been really one of my delights for all of these years, including, of course, having become friendly with Dr. Kuhn. And he also wrote then other small books about the other three quarters, one about Easter, one about Christmas, and one about the summer solstice. But those we are not concerned with now. We are only concerned with this one. So now we are here in trying to pay attention the curious and yet in many ways exciting symbolism of Halloween. So the autumnal equinox, which is about September 21, 22, right around there, with the winter solstice, the spring equinox, and after this is always, I think really mostly a 40-day period after each solstice and equinox, at which time the, let's say, the psycho-spiritual meaning of that portion of the developmental cycle is experienced. Now then, he also very wisely, without mentioning too much of it explicitly, connected this with the four functions of consciousness as they are explained by Dr. Carl Jung, whom Dr. Kuhn also had a great regard for. And so we have the four functions of consciousness, the most physical, the most extroverted, the one the most down to earth being sensation, the next one after that being feeling, and that being followed the thinking or conscious activity, let's say the thinking activity of consciousness. So Halloween then can act as a mnemonic device, which is a highfalutin word, but I like those highfalutin words, and I have my dear professorial friends who are both classicists who are here tonight, and they have been always my reference to my highfalutin Greek and Latin proclivities. But I must confess at the same time that I did have 8 very full school years of Latin and about 3 years of Greek when I went to school also, so we have a good deal in common. In any event, as Dr. Kuhn explains, with the experience of sensation, with the extroversion of consciousness, as we would call it psychologically, with the trying to come to terms with the physical world, which is a doggone difficult thing to do. I have, I think, shared the highly personal information with many of you a while back as to how unhappy I was when I was born. And you know, that shows you that I'm a sugar, you know, that I would remember from the babyhood, from the time of my birth. But I swear to you that from the time that I was born, for about the first year or so, it was always in my consciousness, oh no, not this place again. I really didn't like it. I really didn't like it. Then slowly I got kind of used to it, but you know, it was pretty rough. So let us say I had a kind of personal psychological incident of considerable length, convincing me that at least I don't know about anybody else, really have to get used to living in this reality, that this is not really our reality, but if we are going to be here even for a while, we got to function in it, we got to get used to it, and that in turn is a very stressful activity. This conviction I not only never lost, but I maintained. And so this exactly says, this exactly indicates what Dr. Kuhn in the early part of his little book mentions, that what we are really celebrating in the Halloween festival is the coming to terms with earthly life. That practically all the symbolic elements that appear as decorations, as adjuncts to costuming and things of that sort, when you look at them in depth, will carry somewhat that keynote. And indeed, that is quite important. So I think the first quotation that I was going to read to, I will just summarize, namely that what, let's see, biblically is called the fall, and what people of sort of Gnostic and theosophical inclinations would call the emanation, the coming down to earth, is then characterized by coming to terms with the function of sensation, for one thing, and really with the external world. Dr. Kuhn says the fall and the hopeful rise of the soul, because it sort of stands to reason, and we probably all tried to adhere to that when we were children, that if we fall, it's a good idea to get up, you know. And this, of course, is once again symbolic. Yes, we have come down through the aeons. I don't know what's going on at the door there, but it's all right. An emanational sequence occurs which ends up on the solid ground, on the terra firma. And so once we are on the terra firma, well, then we need to understand what is taking place, and sort of try to begin to have a little consciousness about it, as Carl Jung would call it. In other words, the first function related to our relationship to the physical world is always, it's the function of sensation. A little baby opens its eyes and looks and does various things, including puts almost anything that comes along in its mouth. It's a very the most practical gesture of early life. Can I eat it? Will it taste all right? Or will it be terrible and do I have to spit it out? It's sort of symbolic for the whole earthly life. Are we going to participate in it and maybe gain some consciousness? Or are we going to just explain with the noted exclamation, to hell with it, which I have been tempted to say from time to time. So if we look at the various activities of Halloween, then we see that they all can be thus enrolled, let us say, into this scheme. Now I'll read one of them here from Dr. Kuhn's book on page 9. September 21 then marks the date at which in the significations of zodiacal language, the unit of the fiery spiritual essence, an emanation of creative consciousness from the supreme deity, which is to be the divine soul of man, descending from the heights of noumenal activity toward manifestation in matter, crosses the line from pure consciousness, pure mind force, into union with it. Did I read that right? Yes, in the union with a grade of matter that, being attuned to its vibration, it can mold into an instrument of expression of its potential capabilities of life and consciousness. In other words, this is sort of the symbolic getting in touch with, by way of the extraversion of consciousness, getting in touch with the external, the physical world where we have come, trying to come to terms with it to the best of our ability. And it's, even the very life patterns of the human being, I don't think whether Dr. Kuhn mentioned that or not, but that has always occurred to me, that without help, even when we have come to earth, without help we shall perish. We are helpless. It is. If our mother or some good caretaker weren't there, we would die as babies. And subsequently, for a variety of other reasons, including the depredations and the murderous tendencies of our fellow humans. Because not only the rattlesnakes and the crocodiles can get us, but beware the human. So it's a difficult task, and we are in need of help. And it is really, to a large extent, in order to secure such help, that we reach out in various ways and try to get some assistance for our life. It's absolutely understandable. So then, let us say, so there is the fall and the rise of the soul. And this is governed to a large extent by what psychologically we would call the function of sensation. Even as the next one, the next station, so to say, is governed by feeling. So these, let me see, I think I have one here. It is known that to some degree this science deliberately put out truths under what have been called blinds. And that is, namely, he starts this with, I think I'll start this even earlier, because it touches on another favorite subject of mine. The first tarot card, called the Fool, pictures the soul as a blooming, carefree youth striding gaily forth in such position that his next step will send him plunging over the brink of a sheer precipice. This is the soul in the upper world, ready to descend into incarnation. Perhaps it is only in the cryptic intimations of ancient occult science that the soul is given the appellation of fool. It's quite interesting. Pointing to the folly of leaving heaven for the hardships of earth. How much fooling can you get? Right? For often this recondite methodology disguised its true purport by symbol or character over nature suggestive of the very opposite idea to the one intended to be conveyed, to be initiated. It is known that to some degree this science, namely the esoteric science, deliberately put out truths under what have been called blinds, in order to safeguard precious and dangerous knowledge from the unworthy. In this case, it seems obvious that the arcane wisdom promulgators were not openly designing to give to the world the teaching that the soul is guilty of folly for leaving heaven to gain its evolutionary experience on earth. For if the soul remained forever in the world of spirit, it would only perpetuate its static condition. If it is destined under the cycle of necessity to take further steps in growth, it probably had to be transplanted in successive lives on earth. Unless a grain of wheat fall into the ground, it dies, said Jesus, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. Hardly has it been seen that this statement is the absolute confirmation of the seeming necessity and the naturalness of the fall, or of the soul into this dark underworld of matter and flesh, where alone it can ground itself for a new cycle of growth. This is the law of the cosmos, and we have to remember cosmos means a system, and the soul commits perhaps no folly, yet it is in the understood sense of the word, it does commit her to a long experience of trial and temptation in her bodily life, in which her blundering course of trial and error engages her in much folly. So there we have, let's say, the symbolism of the fool. And I'm going through now some of the evident external symbols which we encounter in Halloween and which all sort of startled me when in the San Joaquin Valley in California I encountered them. And what the heck, pumpkins? What is this? And then the pumpkins have faces and all the various other symbolisms. But now I think with this understanding it certainly made sense. Now I'll come to a symbol which should be in various ways, depending on our state of mind and our orientation, be meaningful to us. What do you think it is? The mask, the Halloween mask. Because it seems to me that if I'm not mistaken, we have been sort of subjected to a government-impelled masquerade for quite a while. Now, of course, there are other and perhaps less enforced forms of masquerade, because there are other times throughout the year, so that, for instance, in the European countries where I grew up, we were also very fond of what they are still fond of in New Orleans, namely the Mardi Gras parties in the period of time between Christmas and or maybe between New Year's and Mardi Gras, the beginning of the Great Fast of Lent. And there, under these conditions, the favorite activity was masking. where the masking was just my good friend over here. The masking was always over the eyes and maybe over the nose. But it could lead to wonderful, funny things, some of which, as a young man, I was involved in. I'm not going to recount. But let's say, you know, in spite of what we have just gone through for a couple of years, masking of that sort can be fun. So maybe we should convey this message to various authorities. Maybe they'll design a way of masking that will be fun. But once again, what is the symbolism? The symbolism is that we are here in disguise. Know ye not that ye are gods? And certainly the antique world, the Greco-Roman world, the Egyptian world, always recognize that. You know, the human was regarded as a often was a once and future God. We've been there once, and you know what? If we work at it, we're going to get back there again. That's the statement of the Gnosis. But in order to do that, we have to undergo a process. And that process must be the recognition of the limitations under which we live in physicality, and how we can get around these, how we can maybe overcome them, how we can add a higher transcendental insight to them. And if and when we learn these things, I never liked the idea that, you know, life is a learning experience. Oh yes, you know what? I'm checking out of the school. But let's say, you know, it is a sort of a learning experience in the sense that we begin to learn that these obstacles under which we operate can be overcome. But whoever or whatever agencies may have devised the ritual cycle of Halloween, or seem to have been of the view that the overcoming of these obstacles under which we operate in the physical world, overcoming physicality, that this can be done and should be done joyously. Fun, excitement, parties, whatever else there may be. In other words, in order to overcome serious obstacles, we have to call upon the reservoir of joy, a reservoir of happy engagement in activities from within ourselves. Because if we don't call upon it, it's not going to come. It's not going to happen. So there has to be a volitional element involved in overcoming difficulties by way of happy energy within us. And that's not easy, especially if you're born a Hungarian, which is a melancholy nation, you know. So I know something about it. But let us say we have to be able to call on this. No matter what happens, there is an element there that can be energetic, that can be enterprising, that can be joyful. It's there, but we have to get to it. We have to call upon it. We have to drag it out of the dungeon of the unconscious by its hair. And if we do, then it will be there. If we don't, then it won't. because this is sort of, this is one of the prime areas where we are already fairly early in life usually tested as to whether we can exercise a volitional effort in the right direction. And that is, be happy. There was a guru, I forget his name, a fairly famous guru whose motto was to be happy, be happy. Well, once I always said, well, thank you so much, Guruji, but how do I do it? Okay, how do I do it? I wouldn't mind. So then we have to learn ways of doing that. And of course, there again, the duality of life, in earthly life, manifests itself to us and becomes a matter of concern. Because the duality means that whatever quality, whatever virtue, as it would be called, and coming from virtus, it means strength. In fact, I'm sorry to offend the feminists, but it means manly strength, virtus. In any event, virtue, strength. It's the strength of the mind, the strength of the spirit, and we have to know how to call upon that, because it's only by way of that virtus that we can overcome the obstacles of earthly life and not allow the external world to defeat us. We have a heroic self within us. There's no doubt about it. And the Greeks, if I am correct, proclaimed that really as the first step of apotheosis. First you become a hero, then you become a demigod or a demigoddess, and then finally you join the Olympians, which I think was probably a very nice endeavor. I sometimes think of, I sort of put myself into, project my mind into ancient Greece and wandering along it, hearing up from the top, up from the mountain, up from the clouds. What do you hear? You hear the laughter. You hear the laughter of the gods. The gods can laugh because they have overcome that which works against laughter. But it's very important. And if you make sort of the right translations in your consciousness instead of just a linguistic translation, you find it in the scriptures of other religions too, including the Christian religion. Because what it's the joy of heaven, and often we see in the lives of the saints. Recently we have been studying here the lives of great mystics, that they also, for the most part, managed to tune in to that happiness region, And they said, God is happiness. When you are in touch with the transcendental, it is right and good to be happy. There are false happinesses in the world, and again, the issue is not so much sin, but it is that when you are happy about something that does not deserve to be happy, then it will lead to unhappiness in due course. So that is where this discernment comes in. What in Sanskrit is called vairagya. You have to be able to discern, to discriminate between that which is worthwhile and that which is not. And that's both on the positive and the negative side. And that is where I think some some great people, like the late and great Pope John Paul II, the Grand Papa, as he was called, said his favorite sentence was, "Don't be afraid." It's true, because fear casts out happiness. Fear casts out the promise of happiness. And that's not a promise that you want to get rid of. That is really something that you want to strive for. And therefore you should, really, what is there to be afraid of? Oh yes, I'm gonna die. Well, yeah, you are. Whether you're afraid or not, Look around the various other people. Look around at your parents. Look around, they all did it. So be intelligent, be circumspect, be cautious, but don't be afraid. And a great deal could be said about that. But these are actually principles that are, let's say, derived from all of this. And that is why, so Dr. Kuhn seems to indicate, that is why probably quite early in the history of humanity and of the various human tribes, maybe in this case in the British Islands, one thing about the people in the British Islands, the various Celtic peoples, Scots, Welsh, Cornish, all the rest of them, they were squeezed there on a little island, not much going on. So I think that one of the motivating factors that went into the visionary Celtic mind was what? Boredom. Because we all know how that is. And when you're able to wiggle through the serpentine path from the external to the internal, one thing that you defeat very nicely is boredom. Because I assure you, and countless people who have been in various ways in touch with the deeper world of transcendence will tell you one thing, that the greater world of the aeons, the greater world of transcendence, the transcendent function, one thing that it doesn't have, it's not boring. It's exciting as all heck get out. And that should be a good incentive to us. The real excitement, the real joy comes from beyond this world. As long as you can, you don't have to take a great big trip. You just have to touch it a little bit, and there it comes. But if you don't, if you keep looking at the ground in front of you, if you keep crawling around in the dirt like a grub, you know what? You're not gonna be very happy. Now, I really, I'm not an entomologist, a scholar of bugs, but I'm rather convinced that grubs are not terribly happy. And that if we don't want to be unhappy, we shouldn't be like a grub either. But of course, joy, happiness, enjoyment, these things, they don't come out as the result of a will. I am going to be happy today, and it's just like a little demon on the back of your shoulder says, "Oh yeah, that's what you think, huh? You're going to be so damn miserable." I'll make you so. So there is always one or the other. But let's say the mysterious revel, the festival of lost meanings, has a great deal to do with that. And so, so the mask, so what are the symbolisms of the mask? Primarily that the real self, the real I, the real you, is hidden, is masked. We live behind the mask. And that is in itself an issue that needs to be understood. Because if you only show your mask to other people in your interaction with humans, you know what? You're not going to be a very popular being. They're going to say, oh, that ugly guy, you know, ugly in mind, because it always shows the mask. And so the attractive part of ours, the nice part of ours, the exciting part of ours, whereby we can cause joy and happiness and friendship with others, is the self without the mask. Yeah, now, okay, tell that to Dr. Fauci. But well, what the heck? He's a good Italian boy. He'll understand that. But let's say we have to somehow be able to divest ourselves of the disguise. And this is where Dr. Kuhn also mentions, of all things, the lowly pumpkin, which really shook me, because of course where I was raised we had pumpkins too, but you know, when we played with the pumpkins it was in summertime, and we made eyes and mouth and so forth, and then put some light inside. Even my father, who was a more prosaic gentleman, but he really enjoyed that. We put out these pumpkins with their eyes shining and so forth, but it wasn't at this time of the year. And so what can it be? Well, just like there is a light inside the pumpkin, so there is the light within this pumpkin that we call the body, you know? And so if we would like to be in communication with that light, if we would like to manifest it, well then maybe we ought to carve the pumpkin. No, I don't mean take a big knife and cut yourself up, of course. But I mean is make openings in the pumpkin that you are. Well, strange expression, you know. But let's say the pumpkin that you inhabit, so that the light that is inside may be seen. It's Jesus Christ says it in the New Testament, that you should show the light that is within you. Don't keep it under a bushel. Don't hide it. And the pumpkin is the bushel. Now, so once again, it reminds us, almost automatically reminds us of the strange dichotomy of a light inside a concealment. And that's what we are. And that, now again you say, all right, but how do I discover that light in all these people who are around and who are really pumpkins? Well, I think one of them is that you try to stimulate, you try to reach for the light that is inside the pumpkin. Which means don't be, pumpkins are they're cute, pumpkins are nice, but what is important in the symbolic sense about the pumpkin is the light that is within. And so we each and every one of us has to find the means whereby we can address the light in other people who are pumpkins. Not easy, because people are funny, as it has been said. And that funniness includes reclusiveness, fearfulness, stupidity, all kinds of things like that. And yet somehow we have to stimulate the light within others so that we can interact with them in that level. Now, what do we have to say about worldly circumstances that come around, such as we have experienced over the last 2.5 years or so, where we are commanded, let's say we are forced to not get into positions where we can address the light in the pumpkins. Why? Because we are not with other people. So you always have to keep in mind which is really a wonderful musical play, but at the same time containing a great many important and wise texts and sayings called Cabaret, written by Mr. Christopher Isherwood, our fellow Californian, whom we saw at. He has been here too, and a wonderful gentleman. I really had a great interest in him. And there it was, what good is it? What good is it sitting alone in your room? Go hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, oh chum, come to the cabaret. And then it goes from there. There's a great deal of wisdom in that. Old people like to reminisce, and I'm afraid that's probably true of myself as well. But let's say, even in the darkest times, during the war, after the war, Soviet rule and things like that, we found some little occasion to be together and to laugh, and to make jokes, and things of that sort. We didn't sit alone in our room if we could possibly help it, for heaven's sake, but we. And when we went over to we had some interesting neighbors in that particular time. But let's see, you came back from a visit from your labors, you probably got a lousy coffee, if you don't mind me saying so, because good ones were not available, and all kinds of things like that. But you got friendship, you got contact, you got something wherein you saw the light in the pumpkin, and they saw the light in your pumpkin. This is extremely important. And I must say, and this is a hobby horse of mine that I should not ride in public in front of you, that, we 100 years, it has been more than 100 years, because it was the year 1900 that depth psychology was born with Sigmund Freud. You got to give old Siggy credit for that. And still, in all kinds of developments that take place in our culture, including the last few years with the lockdowns and lockups and heaven knows what else, psychological factors are not taken care into, are not considered at all. And the psychological damage done by loneliness, by isolation, by various things like that, to young and old, is immense. And we are beginning to know it now. And I think that the non-recognition of such factors is very, very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. You know where you had just a total ignoring, say, of depth psychological principles in public life? In the Soviet Union. That's why you did. Why? Because it was a materialistic culture. Over there is no psyche. What the heck are you talking about, you know? So therefore, forget it. In other words, the damage that you do to people in a psychological way is not occurring because there is no psyche. Oh, really? But you know, these are issues. See, we have gotten to the point, and I'm sure that my dear Alvin Boyd Kuhn would heartily agree. We have gotten to a point where we not only ignore, but deny the soul, the spirit, what the Greeks would call the nous, that which is beyond the body. We are denying that light that shines in the pumpkin, that makes the pumpkin much more dull. You know? So we cannot do that, and we should not do that. And we should continue to pay attention. Now, how does this situation affect me inside? How does what is going on, how does it affect my fellow humans? Because we are not bodies alone, far from it. That is a receptacle. That is a temporary necessity. And when we die, as we all will, then we recognize how temporary that necessity was, you know? And in combination with that, if, let us say, we have some kind of interaction with the so-called dead, various other spirit beings and things like that, then we know how partial, at best, the importance, the significance, the impact of this physical body on the spirit really is. That it is, like many traditions have indicated, it is like a garment. And we know doggone well that garments only last so long, otherwise we wouldn't, the haberdashing business would not be around. And therefore we have to pay attention to that which is deeper and that which is there. And even though, as another very important little book, which was originally a lecture of Dr. Kuhn's, which has to do with the meaning of death, largely with Egyptian overtones. We will have it ready here also. It's really very, very important. So Alvin Boyd Kuhn called this festival a festival of lost meanings. Now, we might ask ourselves, and I'm sure he would be happy to respond to it, why is it lost? Why is the meaning lost? Because we have become extroverted and materialistic. Because we have gotten our minds into a point where we just maybe we mouth things like soul, like spirit, or something, but we don't really act as if these things are real. And yet, I can assure you, and there are others in this room and a heck of a lot of people on this street and in this city who will assure you perhaps even more vociferously that the recognition of the non-physical realities is of extremely great importance. What made, just little examples, what made someone like C.G. Jung such a psycho-spiritual giant among humans? What? Because he paid attention to that which ordinarily is invisible. Because he literally sacrificed himself and his consciousness in order to be in touch with that other world. And that's what made him the giant that he became. Now, obviously, we are not all giants. And it might be a little bit inconvenient if we were. A real big giant. But the issue is that the recognition of psyche, as psychology calls it, soul, or spirit, from spiritus and so forth, the recognition of these as real, and the recognition of the necessity that we are to address ourselves to these realities, because without addressing these realities, our lives will be incredibly impoverished, and we won't have anyone else to blame but ourselves. But I know and you know that we live in I think the euphemism for it is a secular culture. What it really should say is a prosaic, stupid, atheist culture. If you'd like me to use some even more sharp words, I will. I have a vocabulary to that effect. It is. And the thing is, let's say, the non-physical world, the non-extroverted reality is not that difficult to overcome. By overcoming, I mean to develop the kind of consciousness that sees beyond it. The extreme versions of that are extreme asceticism. When people don't eat, when people don't drink, they don't do this, they don't do that, because they want to withdraw from the physical in that fashion. But that hardly ever really works in the long run. But on the other hand, if we have the intentionality, I know that my Redeemer liveth, as the book of Job says. He didn't say I believe. I didn't say I read it in the catechism. He didn't say I know. That's it. That kind of knowing is possible. But we put so many obstacles in the way. We make our pumpkin so doggone big, and you can't see the light in it anymore. And that's a great big mistake. And so I'm now just sort of interpreting the spirit of Dr. Kuhn's treatise and so forth, that if we recognize that there is this light, if we recognize that it is there, if we recognize that it is inside of us, and recognize that it is in our fellow humans, then it will be activated. But that if we don't, then it won't. And as I say, perhaps in other historical periods, I don't know, say my feelings, as many of you know about reincarnation, are very tenuous. For one thing, because I don't want to reincarnate. I had enough. I don't want any more of this. I don't know, maybe something more interesting on Mars or somewhere there. But look, I mean, here you are. What kind of what kind of a culture is this? You are trying to talk about something interesting, and then they come. It's not very nice. But if we address ourselves to this, then we don't need to be deniers of the physical side of reality. For one thing, because for better or for worse, it exists. You can't deny the physical world because you walk on it, we walk on the earth every day and everything else. But you can recognize that in addition to that, and within that, and through that, there is another reality. And this is something you need to remind yourself of. Because particularly the present world, the present culture is not going to. It's going to remind you of all kinds of other stuff, but not that. So you have to make an effort. You have to make an effort and say, yes, the psyche is real. Yes, the spirit is real. Yes, I want to have contact with that reality. I want to see the light within the pumpkin. I want to do that. Why do I want to do that? Because something inside of me cries out for it. And especially in this present culture, there is a wailing wave inside of us that cries out for spiritual things. And what do we give it? Computer screens and balderdash of that sort. Not that there can't be good things on computer screens, but considering the failings, let us say, of human nature, the people who work the instrumentalities of our culture are not going to exert themselves in order to show us or demonstrate to us that which is good, that which is kind, that which is wonderful, that which is promising. No, they will show us other things. And consequently, they will darken our minds, as indeed they are doing. And, you have that, there are all kinds of things that accede to that. Because unenlightened, which is darkened, unenlightened minds can be monkeyed with, Maybe that's not the best word, a little zoological metaphor, But what can be done? They can be that kind of a mindset can be controlled, can be pushed around, can be terrorized, and so forth. And has been throughout history, and probably will continue to be so. Freedom comes from the spirit, from the highest in, because why it's so understandable, because only the truly what comes to you by way of the transcendent function, as Jungian psychology would call it, only that is truly free. Nothing short of that is free. People think that they're going to be very free for this reason or that reason or the other reason. They probably won't. The freedom comes from transcendence. Why? Because only the transcendent is really free. Is free of the limitations, of the shackles, of the chains of the physical world, and of the mental world into which we have locked ourselves. So therefore, strive for that which is higher. Strive for that which is more subtle. Strive for that which is more, if I dare use the word, spiritual, and realize that that is of crucial importance. Because, again, I don't like to be the Bible thumper when I don't have a Bible to thump here. But let's say, what good is it if a man, so it has been said, a man or a woman wins the whole world and loses his soul, his psyche? Are we, as a culture, are we involved in that kind of a process? I leave it up to you to judge, but look around. I think it's very, very dangerous, because then our culture, as other cultures have, becomes a soulless something. And that's a pretty bad thing. It's a pretty bad thing to live in the midst of such a thing. And how do we fight it? How can we deal with it? Well, apparently, and it was Dr. Kuhn's contention, and I certainly thought it was a very good one, that from very early periods of the humanity on Earth, like in old Cornwall and among the other Celts and here and there, or for that matter even the nomadic Finno-Ugrians, which were the ancestors of the Hungarians, they make efforts to break out of the pumpkin, even, break out of the concealment and try to reach for that which is beyond. And the thing is, it's not really that difficult. It's maybe a little more difficult in a materialistic culture like ours, but it's not really that difficult, because we have a desire for it. There is an innate longing inside of us to not only deal with the pumpkin, but to deal with the light in the pumpkin. I think I'm kind of pumpkined out. I shouldn't bring up that curious round object any further. But I think it would be probably enough. I've done that sometimes. I must admit, not recently, that when you experience something, tell yourself, yes, but there's more. I want more. I want more of a good thing. I am capable of experiencing a good thing, and therefore I will. I'm not going to let anything or anybody stop me. If you come and start arguing me about the election or something, I say, you know what? Go and cast your vote, buddy, but meanwhile leave me alone, because I am here for other purposes. Not that that's not important. I have been a U.S. citizen since 1958. Yes. And I have voted in every national election. So I'm not putting the importance of public life down. But we have to recognize that every time that we are confronted with some aspect of reality, one of the many manifestations, shall we say, of the autumnal revel of Halloween, we have to tell ourselves, yes, this is okay, but there is more. I want more, and I deserve more. And if I am really convinced of that and work on that basis, I would say the chances are very great that I will receive more. But if I don't, then it probably will not happen. So let's say if indeed this symbolism is correct, the coming down of the light sparks, once again the book of Job, which says, that as the sparks fly upwards, we are the sparks. The sparks have come down into a habitat which is difficult for them. The reason that there is so much unhappiness, so much anger, so much fear, all of these things in the world is because we are strangers in a strange land. Oh, what do you mean? No, yes, we are. Why? Because there would not be that divine dissatisfaction inside of us. There would not be that longing for the greater. There wouldn't be that cry out, give me more because I am more and I deserve more otherwise. But that there are always agendas in this world, and these agendas, which are generally cultivated by power-hungry, nasty people and things like that, these agendas want to deny that. They want to deflect us from that. They don't think that we are worthy of more than we are getting, especially from a government that never gives you what you need. So let's keep having a Halloween, maybe all year around, and recognize that yes, we can celebrate, we can enjoy, we can have our relationship to having entered the physical, but always at the same time keeping in mind that there is more, that with our effort and with the greater help there shall be more, and that we will indeed be partake of that which is more and more and more of what? More and more of a good thing, of a wise thing, of an insightful thing, of a transformative thing. I won't even say that we are entitled to it, because it is part of us. Without it, we shrivel up. Without transformation, we become less than we are. We become not even somebody, but we become nobody. And that we should not permit. And whatever agendas come in past ages, they may have been religion, and this or that or the other thing. But science, the great worshipped science, has done just as much evil in this world as religion ever has. It's also, C.G. Jung said that the 19th century was the Dark Ages, because it was all eaten up by materialistic science. I wonder what dear old Uncle Carl would say now. What kind of dark ages are these? Yeah, really. But at the same time, sure. Look at the pumpkin. Put on the costume. Have a good time. Have a glass of champagne, which I hope we will have now very shortly, because my palate requires it. I don't know about yours, but mine does. But also remember that we are beings who come from a fullness. That's the Gnostic word. And we are entitled to be in the fullness and to be filled up by it, because we are not partial beings. We are beings of the totality. We are the beings of the ineffable greatness, and we are entitled to it, and we can have it, and with the help of the gods we shall have it. And thank you very much. Happy Halloween.